it takes a whole lot more guts to say, I'm going to risk the house.
Yeah.
I'm going to risk my family. If we end up in the hole to the bank more than $250,000, I can't sleep at night. I'm shutting it down. He literally was one signature away from selling the company.
He didn't put it on the wall, but everyone knew that walked in what he wanted the business to be. Did he communicate that regularly across the board?
I fly home in disgrace, and he goes and buys Grass Valley, my competition's product. Dad had to cut the company from 75 people to 25 people.
At 24 years old, I was let go of my corporate job. By 34, I was financially free with an 8-figure net worth. This podcast is all about taking adversities and turning them into financial success stories. I'm gonna ask for one small favor, and that's for you to click subscribe. Now let's get to the journey. Welcome, David.
Hi.
Well, I'm a kid at a candy store right now because entrepreneurship is so big in my life, and you are the inspiration to a lot of Canadians, and I really appreciate that. And I'll give you a story that happened 10 years ago. I was at a CIBC event, and Alan Bolstein came up to me, and he knew I was this ambitious, young, 24-year-old entrepreneur. And he's like, you need to meet Dave Ross. And I spent about 20 minutes with you, and you gave me, you took the time in such a humble way and just talked about your business and helped me in my business at that time. And I just was like, I came out of that conversation, I'm like, I want to be someone like you in the future. And that was just a one conversation. Just the fact of how humble you were to take your time to spend it with a younger entrepreneur and inspire me to, I ended up growing a business to 45 employees and selling it 4 years after 10 years. And got my exit and all that. So it was always like, I always wanted to inspire to people that have been there and done that. And you're a perfect example of that. So first of all, I want to appreciate you coming on, and I want to hear about you and your story and how it started. I know we were just talking about you and your dad and how your dad started. Could you take me back to how Ross Video started?
Sure. It was before I was born in some ways, because Ross Video has been around for 52 years now, and my father started out just needing a summer job, and he'd actually his father was an engineer actually, and there's a lot of engineering textbooks around the house and so on. So he was always building things and even building transmitters as a kid, illegally, I think. At one point, there was a government truck that went down with a parabolic dish trying to figure out where the interference was coming from. And it was my dad's house as a kid. But anyway, he ended up working at CBC in Winnipeg, and as a transmitter operator, and he was lied about his age. He started in broadcast at 14, he eventually went off and built something called a video production switcher himself in his house. And it was a special effects generator, ready camera 1, cut to 2, fade up to 3, wipe to 4, and that sort of thing for mixing different cameras and sources. And at the time, apparently, there was only like 3 in North America. There was one in New York, one in Los Angeles, and one in a little tiny television station in Winnipeg, which surprised everyone. And then they encouraged him to get his engineering degree, which he did, and they went straight to CBC engineering headquarters in Montreal, which was, in the day, one of the most prestigious video engineering establishments in the whole world. And Dad became even more renowned at the time because he'd be maintaining equipment and designing television studios and things like that. And equipment suppliers would show up saying, okay, we really want to apologize. This equipment was supposed to work properly, but we know it didn't. But we're here with the new circuit boards and all the modifications to make it all right. And they go, we didn't need you. John Ross has already fixed them and redesigned them for us. So then somebody said, you really should be making products, not fixing other people's products. And my dad realized that if he wanted to do that, and he really liked video production switchers back in the day. uh,
How did he like video production switchers? Like, did someone come to him and be like,
Well, it's what he designed back when he was in high school. He actually saw an effect on some television
Mm,
show coming out of New York. He was getting the feed in Winnipeg and went, "That's interesting. I wonder how they did that." So he sat down and figured out how they did it and built one
mm,
himself with tubes and resistors and everything else. So he ended up having, I guess, that excitement back as a high school student led all the way to somebody saying you should start a company. And one of the first things that he did build in that company. Well, first I'll explain the company is that it was a company called Central Dynamics. They were a metal workshop, actually designing landing or building landing gear for the CF-104 fighter plane,
mm,
which is a whole nother story.
mm,
But
mhm,
um, but anyway, so he knew that he needed to punch some holes in some metal and put some buttons into it and things like that, and something he wasn't good at. And then so he approached the owner of the metal workshop saying, "I'll create a whole division inside your metal workshop, and it'll probably work out okay."
mm.
And so they invented electronic video editing. They invented video chroma keying on green screen. They invented automated television station master control. They invented the first solid state video production switcher. They just did first after first after first, and then they went public. And Dad found out that they went public on a notice board in the kitchen. A whole bunch of people made money except for Dad.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think there's words to describe how badly he was treated for
Mm,
all the things that he had created and all the wealth and the jobs he created.
mm.
Um,
Was he an inventor type?
very much
Okay.
so. He is an engineer's
Right.
engineer and still is today. He's 90 years old,
Oh,
still
cool.
designing stuff.
Oh my God.
So somebody said, John, you're running around fixing things that this company keeps messing up, even though you're the engineering brains behind it all. There's a company called Leach Video in Toronto. There's an Image Video in Toronto here, in Canada. There should be a Ross Video. And my dad said, well, I don't have any money. I can't start it. I didn't really make anything out of this IPO, and they said, well, surely you have something. And he said, well, I love flying, and I just completely rebuilt in the garage of my Montreal house. I just refurbished a World War II fabric trainer airplane, top speed, 50 miles an hour. Doesn't even have a radio in it. It's my pride and joy. And they go, sell it. Someday you'll have a better one. And so he did. He sold the plane for $3,500.
And that was his colleagues telling him to sell it?
That was actually a guy named Jim Leach,
Okay.
who was the one that had the Leach video in
Mm.
the world, and so he was a entrepreneur himself, and started his own company and encouraged my dad to do the exact same thing.
So he saw what your dad's capable of, and
Yeah, and he had, because he'd done all these inventions first in Winnipeg, and then in Montreal, and then everybody knew he was the brains behind the Central Dynamics outfit.
mm,
So he was very famous in the
mm.
industry. In fact, he made so many contributions to video that a few years ago there was a major award that was given out for uh, contributions to video. Some years they don't even give it out. I'm trying to remember the name of the award, but that year they gave out two. They gave one to my father and one to the founder of Netflix.
Wow. So
So
that's how prestigious this award
that's
is.
how prestigious it is and
Wow.
what my father has done. So yeah, I got this dad who, I big boots to fill. Let's put it that way.
And was his father an innovator as well, or he just
He was actually my dad. His father was an engineer, and and he in the Second World War he actually had a job chasing radar all over Europe, and his job was to get in front of whether it was the Russians or anything else. Whenever a German installation fell, his job was sometimes face down in the mud, but as an engineer, and he would get in there and grab all the radar equipment that the Germans had, and they'd bring it back to study. And so that was a super secret thing,
Mm,
and so he was deeply involved with that. I don't know if you know the side story about how how they used to say that carrots make your eyes better.
right.
Oh, that originated as a war thing,
Mhm.
where they tried to make the Germans think that they didn't have radar by saying they'd been feeding people carrots because they could see things so far away, but what they actually had was radar.
Oh, wow.
So
It's
my grandfather was involved in that.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. It's funny, my grandma always said that. I mean, she was in Italy in the war, and that was a common saying that she brought to the family too, so yeah.
They publicize it
Yeah,
far and wide because, being able to have radar and
yeah.
not let other side know they had it was a pretty major advantage.
So so that was your grandfather
That was my grandfather.
was an engineer and
Yep.
innovator. Your father was,
An
an
engineer
engine
and
an
an innovator.
innovator. Um, so going back to your father, he then an entrepreneur came to him and said, "You should start Ross Video."
Yes.
And what was his at that time? Do you remember, or did you hear stories of what his thought process was?
Uh,
Because usually innovation and business are two different minds
yes.
in some degrees. A lot of innovators don't like to do business, and a lot of business people, it's too separate.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting in the fact that I think my father lacked confidence when he was even though he went to like you could say it takes a huge amount of confidence to go to a metal shop owner and say I'm going to create a whole business with you, but you're still getting a salary.
Yeah,
You're still designing what you want to do. Uh, it it takes a whole lot more guts to say I'm going to risk the house.
yeah,
I'm going to risk my family. I'm going to put a timer saying when I run out of money, I'm broke.
right.
And if I don't make my product and sell it for a profit in that amount of time, it's all over. So it took a lot. I think my dad had gotten his MBA at the time as well,
Mhm.
so he's an engineer with an MBA, so which is a really good
Yeah,
combination. And he'd had business experience at that
yeah,
point. But there was another aspect to it as well. My father saw in the previous company, personally receiving it in some ways, what it's like to work in a company where people aren't treated well or people aren't respected for their work. He also saw in that company customers not being treated well. There was the idea of, yeah, we got all this cool tech. Let's ship it, make money, and go do something else and maybe not support it. And then forget what things made your company successful. In some ways, there were some bread and butter products that really made the money. But then there's prestige projects and products that they were working on that didn't make money, but were ego projects. And the
mhm,
ego projects got all the resources, and the bread and butter projects that customers really needed were ignored. And so dad actually ended up in the hospital running around trying to solve all these problems, flying around the world, trying to fix things where problems were multiplying faster than he could control them,
mm,
caused by other people.
mm,
And a lot of that was sort of a disrespect for people inside and outside the company.
mm,
So when dad started his company, his idea was we're going to do great engineering, but customers and people come first,
mm.
which was, you sort of say nice guys finish last, but maybe in the long term that's not true
Right,
because that Central Dynamics is now bankrupt.
right.
They imploded under their own weight of the way that they did business, and Ross Video is now known as a company where you want to work or you want to work with.
And when your dad was going through that process, he then started his business, and that was like his core values when he started. Was that on the walls and
Well, there wasn't anything on the walls
uh,
other than the curtains,
but
because
that was communicated throughout the culture and
yes and no. It's really interesting
mm,
because I mean, Dad started. He was employee number one. My mom was employee number two, and he started in the basement of his house. He went to sort of almost like electronic junkyards to get the components as cheap as he could. He went to auctions to get the test equipment, and so it was, I seem to remember we were eating dandelions out of the backyard,
Mm,
somewhere in the middle of the summer when we're running out of money.
right.
That, I sometimes wonder just how close. I know we actually almost didn't make it. We had
Mm,
somebody who came in and bought the product before Dad finished it, and that money actually got us across the finish line. So an act of kindness actually saved the company before it started.
wow. And how old
But
was he at that time?
oh, I'm trying to remember. He was about 40, I
Okay.
guess, at that point, which is a great age for starting your business.
Right.
But I mean, back in those days, he was just working really hard, trying to do the things he wanted to do, which is take care of people in his company, take care of customers. He read a book called Small is Beautiful as well. So he when he after first 6 months or so, he moved the company from our house in Montreal to a town called Iroquois
Mm,
on the St. Lawrence Seaway, an hour south of here in Ottawa, and set it up in the shopping plaza and started doing it for real. But his goal was actually almost like a cottage company. He didn't
mm,
want the big company politics. He didn't want big investment, which is another angle that we probably could talk about, because he talked about profitable growth, not getting greedy, not getting an A, B, C, D, E series growth
mhm,
fund in investment, and so his focus was just doing the right thing. He didn't really put anything on the wall,
mm.
um, and then things started to change, I guess, when I showed up.
And before we get into that, he didn't put it on the wall, but everyone knew that walked in what he wanted the business to be. Did he communicate that regularly across the board? Or was it in his head and he just communicated within your family?
It was in his head. He communicated with the family, uh, and I ended up with dozens of one-liners from my
Mm,
dad that he'd tell me, over the kitchen table and things like that, and just insights. Uh, and it was interesting because I saw him sometimes doing it intermittently.
mm,
He didn't always completely follow through the way he wanted to,
mm,
I think, for a variety of reasons. And sometimes his biggest problem was in a small town getting the right staff. I think he sometimes got trapped into certain situations,
mm.
and it's really hard to run the perfect company if you don't have the right people working for you. So he spent a lot of time chasing the issues that were created by people that maybe weren't as qualified as they should be, or maybe weren't as aligned as they should be. And Dad was, I think, also like a bit of a softie,
Mhm.
and so he would constantly try to take somebody and guide them to be something that maybe they weren't or didn't want to be. And so to have a really nice company, you actually have to sometimes make really tough decisions.
And did you have any siblings?
Yes, I had a
Yeah.
sister.
Okay.
She passed away
Oh,
maybe
sorry.
20 years ago,
Okay.
but she actually worked in the company
Okay.
back in the late 80s and doubled its size. She worked in marketing and
Okay.
sales and did some amazing things.
And tell me about the arrow.
Ah,
Mhm.
yeah, well, that's kind of interesting. I just found out a little while ago because my dad and I, for his 90th birthday, we went to the Air and Space Museum here in Ottawa. And I thought, we just, because I know he likes planes. And I thought, sorry, I'm remembering too much. I thought that, we'd walk around, read some signs, and just have a nice morning together. But what really happened is he walked around, he looked at every single plane and told me a story that wasn't even on the signs. Or if I looked at the signs, there it was. But he just knew it. It wasn't from visiting that place. There's a moment actually, because my father, my grandfather came back after the war, and he was an airport manager in Halifax, I think it was, and he designed a number of the airstrips across Canada, in
Wow.
fact. And and there's a tour group there, with in front of TWA's one of their first three airplanes, which became Air Canada. And my dad looks to me and he goes, "Excuse me, I just have to do something." And he walks up to this tour group and he goes to the head and says, "Do you mind if I interrupt and tell a little bit of a story about the plane you're standing in front of?" And I went, "Sure." And he goes, "See, this plane is my friend." And they're looking at it like, who is this old, 90-year-old man? And he's clearly lost his mind. And he says, "My father, was an airport manager in Halifax, and this plane was often parked at the airport. And my father would bring me to work sometimes, and he was busy, so he put me in this plane, and I would sit in the pilot's seat and pretend I'm flying airplanes, and I'd flip the switches and everything else." Says, "I spent countless hours in the cockpit of this plane, and it was just fun." And he said, "So this plane is my friend," and he says, "I just have to do one thing every time I see this plane." He walked across the barrier, put his hand on, patted it, and said, "Good to see you." But everybody's like, "You're not allowed to do that." How do you stop this 9-year-old man that says, "I played in this plane as a kid that is now this historical thing"? Anyway, so we walk around this museum and we come to this 104 fighter. And my dad says, "There's a story behind this plane." He says, What is that?" He says, "Well, if you understand the story, there was originally, we had the Avro Arrow, and it was, the fastest, the highest flying, the most powerful interceptor ever built at the time. And there was a lot of politics involved, and the Americans convinced the Canadians that we didn't need a plane like that. What we really needed was missile interceptors, and the day of the planes are gone. So we agreed to scrap all of the arrows and destroy all the plans. And most of the people that designed that went off and helped the moon landing, actually. And so we lost a lot of great people. But shortly after that, they went, "Well, maybe we're a little bit hasty. You do need planes after all, but we've got some great American ones for you to buy." And one of them was a CF-104 fighter plane. And so there was a contract, but the Canadian government said, "Well, at least after all that, we should at least have some jobs in Canada, considering we were going to make the whole airplane ourselves before." And so pieces of that plane went out for contract. And there was a man who saw that and realized that there could be money made. And so he decided he was going to bid on the nose gear of the plane, but he didn't own anything. And he actually took the Canadian government and the military through a tour of a metal workshop of a friend of his that he didn't own, that he'd only seen that morning. He didn't even know where the bathrooms were, but he brought them all through, pointed at all the different machines that were there, explained that he had all the capacity to do it, and then got the contract. Once he had the contract, he went to the bank, said, "Well, I've got a contract, so you can give me some money." And he bought a metal workshop and built the landing gear.
Wow.
And that company was called Central Dynamics, which is the company that my father approached. The interesting thing about it is it takes a special sort of person to create, you could say, a lie that big. And pull it off at the same time. So the things that really were innovative that made him create that also were the things that were the downfall of his company later in the way that he treated people.
Right.
But if Dad had chosen a different metal workshop, or that person was different, he would never have started our company, because he would have been happy as an employee and never felt the need to start his own company. So there's this weird connection of not just airplanes, but if the Avro Arrow had not been shut down, Ross Video would not exist today, which is, I just think these connections are bizarre.
And do you reflect on these connections like now, going through the process? Like,
there's always connections. There's always luck. There's always, how did that happen at this particular moment? Maybe some of it is you're just ready to make your own luck, but certainly you have to see luck when it comes by and jump on it.
and I see you light up when you talk about your dad.
Well, it's quite the story.
Do you have a really good relationship with your dad?
Yes. Yeah, I think we do. Yeah.
I could tell, like, just you talking about his story and how he started is it's like there's a light bulb that comes off whenever you talk about him. So now he is so now the company started.
Yep.
What happens next?
Well, one of the things that happened is, the company grew and Dad made some great production switchers. He turned down a number of opportunities to get even contracts. He wanted to keep the company small. I think he was afraid that if he ever had to downsize, he didn't want to get out of his control. He wanted to be able to know that if he could do any job in the company, just in case. Uh, and that was a real risk. And so in
Risk in what sense?
well, what happened is in from 1989 to 91, there was a massive recession, and Dad had to cut the company from 75 people to 25 people, and there wasn't resilience in the company to handle that. And he had a little lab in Ottawa doing some R&D work. He had to shut all that down, and the future of the company was looking pretty bleak. He only had like 3 engineers left and working for him. And on top of that, I was graduating from University of Waterloo from computer engineering, and I knew digital technology was coming, and Dad was an analog, design genius. And uh, I said, Dad, there's black magic involved in what you know how to do. And you can't put 10 engineers in a room to create the brilliant circuits that you've created. But when digital comes, you can put a bunch of co-op students in a room, give them specification, and they'll build it. We need to scale. And it's not about small is beautiful anymore. We have to grow, and we have to grow now. Uh, and so that was part of the conversation, I think, when I joined, that Dad's idea of this kind of lifestyle company in a small town, Ontario, had to change if it was going to survive.
How did you know that at 20
24.
24? Like, how did you know that big vision? Because that's a completely different trajectory that your dad had from a mindset perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd been doing engineering since I was 9 years old. When I was in public school and early high school, I'd won 3 national science fair competitions. When I was in university, I was there for a long time because because I was in co-op, so that added a year. I switched from math, computer science to computer engineering, which meant I had to do another year. And then in the middle of my schooling, I'd been working for Dad as an engineer, as a co-op student, as designing. Well, I ended up redesigning all the software and all the switchers myself. And at the end of the co-op term, my dad said, "You can't leave." I went, "No, I'm going back to third year." He says, "No, you can't leave. Nobody can pick up the work. You're too experienced, even at 22 or
Right.
whatever I was at the time." And so I had to take a year off school and finish all the projects and do a whole bunch of electronic design and things like that. And then I went off and I worked at Electro Home and got some experience at other companies. So by the time I graduated, I was ready to be a manager.
Mm.
And I'd taken a lot of entrepreneurship courses and management courses and things like that as well in university. So, and I'd grown up with a company. But the biggest thing is I saw what we as students knew how to do. And I knew that digital was a matter of scale as opposed to deep expertise in a lot of the sorts of things we need to do. And so that's why I said, Dad, the company's come within a hair's breadth of being shut down. He was actually a signature away from selling it to the guy Jim Leach, actually, or his son at the time, because Dad had almost given up, which is really tough.
And at that point, was that your direction after going to Waterloo? Did you have any plans to potentially go somewhere else and
Yeah,
work for somewhere else?
yeah. I must. Well, my dad was an airplane guy. I was a space guy. I always thought it was cool looking at space shuttles and space probes and things like that. And so I was thinking about going to work for NASA. Grew up, with moon landings and things like that when I was younger. The tail end of that, anyway. And Either that or maybe Microsoft, because Bill Gates had been swinging by, personally by the University of Waterloo at the time, saying, "Come work for us.
Mm.
There's a great future in software." And so I had these two dazzling ideas. One is work in Silicon Valley and do cool things, and the other one was work in space
Mm.
stuff. And so uh, and then there's Dad's company in Iroquois that had just laid off 2/3 of the staff, and Dad was about to sell it. Which one do you choose?
I don't know. That's a tough. That's a what was the final decision making in your mind that moved you to Ross?
I think it was family obligation.
Okay.
And there's also a feeling like I'd grown up with a family, with a company in my life, and I just kind of felt like, well, it's always been there, and maybe I took it a little bit for granted, and suddenly I realized that if I didn't step in and help Dad in any way that I could without having a clear view of exactly how I was going to do it, um, we could lose it. And so you could also say there was fear involved. And that actually is really interesting. People say, "David, you must have this master plan, and you guys have done so really well building this company called Ross Video." And I would say at least the first 15 years that I was there, every single decision was motivated by fear.
Wow.
It's like, if we don't do this, we could get destroyed. We outcompeted. If we don't do this and push this hard, we might not get it done in time. We don't do this, we only have one product. We could be wiped out if we have a competitor that does something we don't see coming. And so everything was put everything you possibly can into the company for 15 straight years, because of fear of losing it. But that fear drove some fabulous decisions in the
Mm.
end.
Now you talk about that one signature that
Mm,
kept the business.
yeah,
What happened there?
he didn't sign, and that company became very angry with us.
So he was going through the due diligence like the due
It
diligence
was
was
done.
done,
It was done. He literally was one signature away from selling the company.
and then you came along.
Then I came along, went upstairs. My mom said, "You need to talk to Dad. He's about to sell the company. You should just know that this is about to happen." And when I talked to Dad, I said,
What was that conversation?
I said to him, maybe the two of us working together can save this and turn it around. And my dad said to me, there's a lot of satisfaction you can get from turning nothing into something. And those words really stuck with me, because on one side, it's you could say it's an aspirational statement, but it's also a statement of showing how low my father was feeling. I mean, the company was 15 years old. I mean, that was longer than you had your company by 5 years.
Mhm.
That's in theory a fairly established company, but to use the word nothing to describe it shows a little bit an element of despair.
And was it because he didn't keep up with the times?
Yeah, there's a
Like
couple
what?
of
Yeah,
things.
what caused that? Mm.
When Dad started the company, there weren't any there were there weren't any really dangerous big competitors, I think. There was a bunch of small companies. They were almost friendly with each other. But over those 15 years, there was consolidation, serious business people getting involved, and real marketing machines, international sales teams forming on the competition, and then starting to say, we're not just going to be doing analog technology, we're going to start doing digital technology, changing the minds of customers that the things that Dad were building were no longer cutting edge. And even convincing people that our quality wasn't as good as it was, because that's the way marketing works.
Right.
And so those changes, plus a recession, plus being a single product company,
Mm.
was an issue. And actually, the dad actually asked my dad. My dad asked Leach an interesting question. He says, "How did you fare through the recession? You're trying to buy a company at the tail end of this." And they said, "We grew."
Mm.
Edwin, how did you grow in a recession?
Mm.
And they said, "Well, we had more than one thing." And it turns out that in recessions, people continue to buy things. They just buy different things. So when you're not in a recession, you're doing big capital projects where you're buying expensive things or renovating big projects and things like that, big capital projects. And then in recessions, you still have some budget. So you're nibbling around the edges, you're fixing little things, but you may be spending nearly the same amount. So we had big things and little things. And my dad kind of, the light bulb went off in my head, and my dad went, "Oh my God, this balance of having a recession-proof product line just, I think, blew his mind." So the first thing he started doing after when I joined, I thought I was going to be in an office with my dad. I saw his chair, I saw my chair, two desks in a room, two lamps. This is going to be great. My very first day when I went into that office, my dad looked at me and said, "Well, welcome. I'm off to start a whole new group inside the company." And he picked up a bunch of papers, and that was it.
Mm.
Now his office was my office. He went off and started the little stuff, and my job was to take over the big stuff.
So he did what he wanted to do at the other company within Ross Video,
Exactly. Yeah. And
and that's what he was.
he became an entrepreneur inside
Right.
the company. He started up a whole nother product line. And those synergies between his new product line and the existing products that I was working on worked out extremely well.
Intrapreneur and entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Like inside the company, there's a lot of amazing people that work in a company that don't want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be inside creating stuff. And that sounded like what your dad did for Ross Video at the time.
It is. Yeah. Actually, on that topic, one of the things I've given some talks in front of entrepreneurs sometimes, and I've stood up and I said, "Okay, how many people here in the audience? Maybe there's 200 or 300 people there. You're starting companies, right? How many people are starting a company? Like 90% of the hands go up, or you've just started one. Great. How many of you are quitting your company because you felt unappreciated or unheard in their previous company?" Almost every single hand went up. I said, "So, when you start your companies and you have those innovators inside your companies, how are you going to treat them? Do you want them to innovate in your company, or do you want them to say goodbye and start their own companies?"
Mm.
And I said, one of the keys that I found over the years, I've said it a few times, is that the key to our company's success is hiring really smart people and not pissing them off.
Mm.
And so you create this flywheel of good people who don't leave, who innovate, who then attract other great people who then don't leave and innovate, and they attract even more. And you end up with a company where people say, "This is the best place I've ever worked." And the people I'm working with are just amazing. How did you find all these wonderful people? The answer is we didn't piss them off.
I love that. And going back to yourself as the entrepreneur now, and do you believe that you were born as an entrepreneur, or
Hmm.
in the sense of, okay, you have an engineering degree at that point. Did you have any business experience?
No, I never ran a lemonade stand.
At 8 years old, yeah, you're
But although, when my high school students were, my high school friends were with their pumping gas and flipping burgers as their summer job, I was rewriting inventory control software.
right.
So
So more the operational stuff
yeah,
versus the client facing business side.
yeah,
And when you stepped into that role, what was going on in your mind at that point? Because you had a vision.
yeah.
Your dad was next to you. What was going through your mind at that point?
Well, I was actually living in Ottawa. I couldn't convince my wife to live in a small town, so I would drive an hour from Ottawa down to Iroquois, and I'd try to do my job, and I'd be trying to build a product, for example, and I'd ask somebody, "Okay, how do I order parts for this prototype?" And one person would tell me one thing, another person would tell me another thing. Somebody would pull out a photocopy from 10 years old in forms. And I was like, "Oh my God, Dad, what did you do?" And I said, so I started getting involved in internal processes in the company. And then I'd go to a trade show for the first time, and I'd ask Okay, so I'm going to be standing in front of this product and people are going to ask me questions about why they should buy it. So why should they buy it? Like I didn't get this genetically. I don't know about dad's company. I'm still new from that point of view in some ways, certainly from a sales and marketing point of view. And I'd say, so how how do I sell this? Why is it better than the competition? And they would say to me, well, because John Ross says it is. I went, that's all you got? And
Can't
so,
put because are you thinking like from a marketing
yeah,
perspective? Like, how do you put that on a pamphlet?
yeah, well, exactly. Even it was even more visceral than that
Right.
because you're sitting there and you know you're going to be going to a trade show. There's going to be 100,000 people walking up and down the aisle. Somebody's going to walk up to you and look at the product that you're standing in front of and say, "Sell me this."
Right.
And if my only answer is, "Well, my dad says it's good," I knew that that was not an acceptable answer. So I'd go around and I'd ask people a question here and there, and I'd start writing down and created a comparison sheet and a marketing cut sheet and stuff like that. And then I'd finally interview my dad, who would give me about, you know, 10 minutes because he was busy doing something else. It wasn't his focus at all. And I'd extract what I could in short conversations. And eventually I started learning sales. I started learning marketing. I learned internal processes. I learned how to build companies. Whenever I was driving from Ottawa to Iroquois and back, I'd have a little Sony, tape recorder,
Mm.
and I would spend the whole time making notes from the end of my day going, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, tomorrow I need to do this, tomorrow I need to do this, and so on. There's just a million ideas of how do we turn this company around. And it was all the little stuff,
Mm.
but the little stuff is the big stuff in some ways.
Right.
Like, why do customers buy our products?
Mm.
That's a very it's a big question as well as a little question in some ways.
And if you simplify things in business, it gets to the root of things where then you can actually sell it because you understand the root of things. Like I do feel business owners overcomplicate a lot of marketing material and whatnot. And if you just stick to the basics, the,
Oh, yeah.
the basics communicate the idea better than anything.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of you should be talking about benefits, not features.
Right.
Yeah, you should have your elevator speech down, and if somebody says, "What does your company do?" you should be able to answer that. Somebody should be able to go to your website and have some idea of. I've seen so many websites of so many entrepreneurs, companies. And I go, I'm not a dumb person, but
Mm.
I don't understand what your company does. I can't find anywhere that explains it.
Mm.
So yeah, the basics are really important.
Now, are you putting on your engineering hat for business at this point to like solve all the problems in the business? Is that
Isn't that what business is problem solving?
right?
Like one of the things people say is, what was the thing that caused Ross Video to become like a 1,500 and growing company? And I sometimes I like to say, it's not one thing. It's avoiding the 1,000 little things that can take your company down.
Mm.
You don't leave an open flank. You make sure you have good people. You make sure you have a strategy. You make sure you have good sales and good marketing and good processes and good quality, and that people all know what direction they're going to. And you think about all these different things, everything from managing your supply chain, managing your cash, making sure you have good margins. Eventually, you develop a bit of a fortress of a company.
And you talked about 15 years of fear
Yeah.
driving decision making. What was the fear? Was the fear of bankruptcy? The fear of
Fear of bankruptcy, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing from the moment I started. There, there, there was a moment about 2 or 3 years in where my dad was still, admittedly conservative. He didn't ever want to take on any debt, and he. I shouldn't say this on the radio. It's kind of funny, but he sales weren't good, and costs were too high, and we started losing money. And at the time, my dad drew a line saying, I think the number was, if we end up in the hole to the bank more than $250,000, I can't sleep at night. I'm shutting it down. I just shut the company. I can't do it. It's too stressful. I don't want to do this again. And a couple of months later, my head of finance comes to me, closes the door, and we bring in the head of sales, and he goes, "David, I've done the projection. If I do the financials this month, we're at like minus 258." And they both look at me and go, "We know what your father said. What do we do?" And I thought about it. And I said, "We lie." I said, "I know enough about finance that you can probably move stuff around that we don't quite cross that threshold." And I turned to the head of sales. I said, "How's it really looking?" He says, "Well, the pipeline's building. I actually honestly think we can turn this around. We're going to go through the dip. We're not just going to keep going through. We just need to moderate the numbers so that your father doesn't pull that switch, and then we pull it through the other way." I told and so that's what we did. And told my dad 10 years later about the story, and he looked at me in shock. And I said, "You're welcome."
Yeah, right. How did you get he was risk conservative.
Yeah.
How were you able to stomach that?
I was I wasn't as risk averse. And I actually felt that, well, the way I would describe it now, the most important thing is money in the bank. It's effective deployment of capital. And so, you sit there and go, if we're going to spend $100,000 on this or 500,000 on that, if it's got a fabulous short-term return, we should do it, as long as we don't overextend ourselves beyond what the bank is willing to give us.
So like opportunity costs in regards to every capital decision type of thing?
Kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't think about it as risk. I often think about it as, there's a risk for investing in something in the future, but if you really feel like you've got a great business plan behind it, you understand the market, the competition, the customers, your own internal capabilities, your execution abilities, the bigger risk is not doing it.
And there's always two sides to every coin.
Mm.
You're looking at the confident side, the optimistic side. When you're going through that analysis of when you were in the business for 2 to 3 years, you're seeing your finance individuals coming to you that with debt of $258,000. But then you're also looking at the sales pipeline and being like, well, actually, the opportunity is triple that in regards to profit potentially because of what you're building. My question to you is like, if that happened the first 6 months, were you starting to get things in place at that point to be like, okay, I'm building the confidence, I see where the problems are that I could fix. I have more visibility. I I have my hand more on the pulse where now I'm looking at the bright side versus the other side?
It took a while.
Uh,
There's a bit of a flywheel there in,
mhm,
in anybody's learning inside the company. I mean, we went through lots of bumps. There was a government grant that Dad wanted me to close that we'd already been approved, and there's some paperwork that need to be done. So my first few months were getting that paperwork together. But the terms of the grant were so bad that I went to Dad and I went, "I don't think we should do this. It's locking in a whole bunch of things that no business should ever agree to." And so we stepped away from that. And my dad said, "Okay, go design a digital switcher because that's what the competition's working on." And I went, "Okay." And I came up with some design ideas that I thought were pretty innovative. And then I said, "So I need a team now. I can't do this all by myself. I just can't." And he says, "Well, we can't afford a team." And I went, "Dad, I just spent 4 months. I have not accomplished anything of value yet. Give me a better job in this company. Like, you wanted me here to save the company. I've done 2 different things, neither of which has worked out." And that was when Dad decided that he was gonna go off and start this other product line.
mhm.
I take over the existing product line. So there is a step forward, and now I'm actually doing something. And so I'm taking one of Dad's personal engineering designs, working with a new integrated circuit chip that was supposed to be revolutionary from a Canadian chip company, actually. And and it takes me a while because I'm doing the scheduling, making sure people do like high level stuff.
Mm.
But I start doing a deeper dive, going, why are we not progressing? And eventually, I sat down with one of our technicians, very bright guy, and his name was Donald. And I said, Donald, we've spun this circuit board like 5 different times, and we're about to talk about a 6th, and the stuff you're doing, you're putting magnets on the top of chips. This is crazy stuff. Do you think we'll ever make this work? And he looked up at me. He's got a soldering iron in his hand, and he goes, nope. Why? So I think it's fundamentally undoable. And then he continued to solder, and I'm like, oh my God. People will continue to build stuff that is unbuildable on a project that is never going to work because they're asked to do it. I have to stop this now. I went to Dad, and I went, Dad, the whole engineering design of this thing's built on sand. Like, he goes, yeah, probably is. I've been managing this project for 4 months. We wasted another 4 months. Like, I'm 7 months in. This is crazy. And he says, yeah, you probably should kill it. I just didn't have the heart. And so, and now to be fair, time went on, and we learned more and more things, reasons why it wouldn't work. So that evening, I sat down and said, well, this product had a market. I can take an older product, modify it faster. I know it'll work, and make it hit the same market. Might be a little bit more expensive to build. It's built on older technology, but it's something to do. And I worked with Dad on schematic diagrams and the outline of what this other product would be. And on Monday morning, I brought the team together and I said, we're not going to finish the other project. I know you've been working on it for 2 years, long before I even showed up. So put everything on floppy disks, put it over there. We'll have about 10 seconds of silence. Now, here's your new project. We're going to do this. I think we can get to market in 4 months. I think we got customers in line, and let's go. We're now busy. And we did it. We got it to market in 4 months, and it was a hugely, fabulously selling product. And that was the moment I had my first win. And I started to own it, as opposed, like, I was working on the company instead of in the company. And that's when I started to develop the confidence of I can actually change the direction and trajectory of this company in a meaningful way. And that was a huge win.
And at that time, was your allocation of time 50% engineering, 50% on the business? Or was it?
I was officially 100% on engineering.
Okay.
But to get my job done in engineering, I had to work on the business because there was a lot of processes that needed to be put in place. But there was other things that happened as well, like that were really great for me as an entrepreneur. I remember, once I got that product out, the head of sales comes to me and says, David, we have a customer, I think it was like the CBC or something like that, in Quebec City, and they need training on our product. And so we don't have anybody to do it. Everybody's full up, which is great news, but you have to go do training. I went, training? I'm an engineering manager. I'm an engineer. I actually don't know everything about how this product works. Right. And so they put me on an airplane, and I fly to Quebec City, and I'm reading the manual in my lap, memorizing every single button, what they all do inside this product that my dad ultimately designed. And I land, and I go to the TV station, and I sit down, and I say, the best way for you to learn this product is to know the manual. And so I'm going to go through the manual with you page by page. And by the time you're done, not only will you know everything about how this product works, but you have this great reference guide to remind you.
And how did it go?
Well, it turned out so well that I went back and I went, oh, that worked pretty well. They said, David, you did such a great job in Quebec City, because a couple of months later, we got this customer in Texas at a university, and they want to buy one of those things. Well, clearly you're now an expert in that product. So why don't you go down all by yourself to Texas and sell this product for us? I went, wait, now I've gone from engineering management to training. Now I'm in sales, just 2 weeks. Okay, I'll get on a plane. So I go down, and I show up all by myself in a taxi cab out of the airport, and I walk into the door of this university who's teaching how to do television. And the engineer meets me there, takes me back to his office, and he says, so David Ross from Ross Video, not knowing that really John Ross from Ross Videos, the guy he really wants to meet.
Mm.
And I'm just this, I'm
Right.
like maybe 25 years old, 26 years old. And he says, yeah, so honored to have you here. Probably the first time anybody ever said that to me, but of course they were mistaken as to who they were talking to. And and he says, well, let's go. I went, go where? I said, they're all waiting for you. I said, what are you talking about? And he says, and he takes me down the hallway to a big gymnasium where there's like 300 students up in the bleachers. He brings me up on stage. There's a microphone, and he says to the student body, says, everybody, you know for a fact that we're trying to choose our next production switcher, and we are so fortunate to have David Ross of Ross Video here today to help us with our decision. David, we want you to tell us why we should buy the Ross Video RVS 424 instead of the Grass Valley Model 200. Give us a comparison to help us in our decision. And I go to the microphone and I go, I can answer any question you want about the 424. I've never even heard of a Grass Valley Model 200. I am so sorry. And the guy looks at me in shock.
Right.
And he asked one or two questions. The whole thing's over in 5 minutes. He puts me in a cab. I fly home in disgrace, and he goes and buys Grass Valley, my competition's product. And I then, out of that humiliation, if I was on naked on stage, it couldn't have been any worse.
Right.
And so I saw that guy like 3 years later on our trade show booth, just wandering around. I run across, I shake his hand. I almost give him a hug. He goes, I say, thank you, thank you, thank you. He says, what are you talking about? I didn't buy from you. He says, I know, but you changed my life and you've changed this company. So what? I said, I don't know how I didn't realize this. Even as an engineering manager, even in doing training, even doing marketing materials, that the most important thing was not just to know your product, but to
No,
know
your
your
competition.
competition. And I've made it my life I've read every single manual of my competition end to end, and then looked at all of their marketing material, and I am now an expert in the industry. And it has completely changed, again, the strategic choices we make on what we're building next. And we're now building amazing things that people love. And that was a huge turning point for our company then strategically. Because then I went from being an engineer that understood systems to an industry expert who then had this company wrapped around him that could make new things happen that were great.
So are you going to trade shows now and looking at your competition, and like how are you embracing in
Wow, it's 30 years later now. I still do. I still like to think I have a pretty good grasp of the industry. I can't get down to the same detail. I can't read every manual because I've bought 24 companies. But now I make sure our product managers know our competition cold as well. And knowing the industry now, it takes it to a whole nother level. Instead of understanding what product to build next and having that intuition, now it gives me an understanding of what companies to buy next and
Mhm.
how they all piece together like Lego blocks into something that I know that is competitive, that moves in new market verticals, it advances us in new geographies, that creates new systems of products and new technologies.
Was that the turning point of taking your fear, the 15 years of fear, and turning into what was the what changed that mindset of fear of surviving to thriving?
Wow. Uh, yeah, it was more of an evolution. I don't think a
Okay.
switch flipped,
Okay.
but one thing that did happen along the way is, Dad wanted to retire, and so it turns out you can't give a company to your kids, and so I had to buy the company from Dad out of company profits. And so he valued the company at like one-time sales, and with gross margin and everything else, it took me about 7 years. But I eventually bought him out, and we did something called a crystallization process, and I bought his share, and then everything that was left was mine and my sister's actually. Um, After we did that, there was a really interesting moment because we've been growing and been successful, but we're still just a few products. I met somebody told me I needed to meet an entrepreneur out of the Netherlands, and he'd created this new character generator software program, and it was good. And I met with him after a trade show, and with my CTO Troy and my head of marketing Jeff, and so I'm saying to Troy after the demo, I said, I really like this guy. I think his product is going to go someplace. I think we should partner with them, maybe even resell what they have. And he goes, Dave, you should buy them. They're small. There's only like 3 people in the company. I went, Troy, we got 2 problems. One is we have no money. 2, I have no idea how to buy a company. I've never done it. Troy looks at me and goes, do it anyway. I look at him and some switch flipped in my head. And I went, okay. And I just walked over to him and said, hey, is your company for sale? And he goes, no. Well, maybe, could be. I mean, and 9 months later, I figured out the mechanics of how to buy a company and how to do it with very little cash, because there were shares, there's a back end deal as well, where there's an earnout plus a little bit of cash, and we're able to borrow some cash because there's new revenue coming in from his company, and there's a little bit of ours, and so it cobbled together, the elements of that. That tiny little company, which was less than $1 million in revenue, is now over $100 million in revenue as a software company. And so we've had a few home runs like that. So as things like that started to happen, that was the moment where the fear started to go down a little bit, and the confidence and the understanding of we've got many legs underneath this table now, that it's super stable, that if somebody comes at us for our production switchers, we've got graphics. If the graphics are in trouble, we've got the modular products that my dad designed, and the evolution of that, or we got some other new products. And so we went, okay, this is really great, because it used to be that we used to say we have burgers, and then we had burgers and fries when Dad did his second thing, and then we said, well, what's the hot apple pie? What's the milkshake? What's the value meal? And so we've continued this idea of adding adjacencies, not just internally inside of our R&D and new products, but buying companies and expanding the company now.
And you've had tremendous growth over the last 35 years.
17% a year, every single year for 35 straight years, no down years, all internally financed, doubling every 5 years. It turns out when you fold a piece of paper and then you fold it again, it's pretty thick, pretty fast. And we've been enjoying that.
And the strategy, that switch that went off, did that turn into a major strategy over
Yes, it did. Once we bought our first company, we've been buying, on average, like 1.5 companies a year. We've been doing that for 16 or 17 years now. Last year we bought 3 companies. And it's been really cool, because you bring in brilliant new people, you bring in new technologies that would be too hard for you to develop. Like, we got into robotics, right? So, I knew about circuit boards and software, but robots, camera motion systems, and we're now number 1 in the world in camera motion systems for broadcast and sports applications. And a few years ago, we bought SpiderCam. So if you watched, for example, the Olympic hockey game with the women and the men, and you got some great
recently.
yeah.
It's still painful.
Still painful, but if you saw some really cool camera angles, that was because we had a cable camera suspended over the ice rink, and that was Ross at the Olympics. And
I actually saw a camera on the ice as well. I mean, it was okay. Yeah. So now, where are you guys today? You guys are across the world.
Yeah, we got like 40 different offices around the world. We've bought 24 companies. We have 1,500 employees. We're viewed as one of the giants in the industry. And I announced last year that we wanted to double in the next 5 years, which sounds really amazing, because it'll take us to $1 billion in revenue. But all we have to do is what we've done 7 times in a row already. Just have to do it one more.
Why double now?
Because it's what we've always done. it's kind of funny. Like when you say let's double the company,
Mm.
when you're like a
So,
500
and double revenue, double employees,
double
double.
revenue.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing about Canadian entrepreneurship
Mm.
as well. Is that when you get to 1,500 people and 500 employees, people think you're now an established company, you're mature, and you should act like it, I guess. And it's like, no, I, we should continue to do what's made the company great. Why can't there be a great Canadian company? Like, I mean, Nortel did it. I hate to say Nortel. BlackBerry, no. Pick one that did. Anyway,
That's great.
but yeah, I mean, there can be.
Cleo's doing it.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. You know, there's some other great Shopify.
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody said to Shopify, look, you're already at 500 million. Stop, just milk the company. Stop adding people. You know, it's big enough for Canada. That would have been a tragedy. You know, so there is a pressure in Canadian entrepreneurship that says, sell it before you lose it all. You've got to this point, you know, you need maybe an American firm to take it further or something like that. You know, it's kind of like, really? Like what's wrong with people to not think that?
Why is that the culture? Why is that the philosophy here?
Maybe there's not enough role models. I'm not sure. Because I always thought our company should be run like an American company.
Mm.
From the perspective of being growth-minded, being aggressive in sales and marketing, in being balanced between sales and marketing and reinvestment to R&D, in aspirations, in acquisitions, you know, and not setting self-imposed limits on what the company can be.
And when you have conversations with Americans, my wife's American, originally from America. So the conversations I have are different when you go, they're born with entrepreneurship, it feels like,
Yeah.
where the risk tolerance is a lot higher than a lot of Canadians per se. Do you think bigger when you go down there type of thing? Or you've just been ingrained in just keep on thinking big and big and big?
Oh, well, nothing was ingrained in me in a way. At the start, remember 15 years of fear.
Yeah.
It was all about survival and understanding your competition, and, you know, get them before they get you. Isn't that Hill Street Blues? But it was so. It wasn't until we started to feel real success and bought our first company and felt that this could be something really amazing that it sort of flipped from the point of view of let's really go for it. In the earlier days, it was more like let's just reinvest in sales and marketing R&D. But I remember when we hit about 10 or 20 million, I couldn't believe the number of advisors that would tell me that I should sell
Mm.
or I could lose it all. You know, and the statements was like, you got to think about your family. You've built this thing. If you sell it now, you can take care of your family forever, you know, and how would you feel if you lost it all? And I thought to myself, I don't feel like I'm losing it all. I feel like we're winning. And it plays with your head because you sit there and go, I'm passing through this threshold where everybody's telling me it's time to sell. And it is about the size that most Canadian companies sell, you know, the 10 or 20 million
Mm.
level. Uh, it when you don't do that, you think, am I doing something wrong? Am I losing?
How did you have belief in yourself to not listen to these experts? And also, you telling about your story about your dad and him being risk adverse, you're also ingrained in that noise growing up as well, just naturally. Like, how did you
I think
break
that
through that barrier?
I think I was having too much fun. Like one of the things is that when you're growing your company and you don't know, you don't look 20 years out. You look, you know, 3 to 5 years out. And so when you're growing your company, once you get to the top of a mountain range, you see the next mountain range and maybe a hint of the mountain range after that. So you climb the next mountain, which usually means going through a bit of a dip and to force your way to that next thing. And you're higher up, and then you see the next mountain range starting to come out of the mist. It's like, wow, is that possible? That next thing? And so as long as you keep seeing just enough of a hint of what that future could be and an idea of like what direction the compass takes you is to get there, then it's kind of like, I don't want to stop. I've got this vision of what I want to do next. You share that with everybody in your company. They see it as well. And together you make it happen. Why would you sell in the middle of that?
And you talked during it about resilience. How do you develop that resilience to go through those dips? And those dips probably get darker, lonelier. Every horizon, there's probably a bigger dip, a bigger challenge, a bigger obstacle.
So you're talking about personal resilience or corporate resilience?
Both.
Ah.
Because it all correlates together. Those conversations those advisors are having with you is sell for your family. Everything relates to the individual from a business perspective. So, yeah, both from a leader perspective.
It's interesting. I actually had one of my business managers ask me the exact same question just yesterday.
Okay.
I mean, well, the company is doing well. There's always a business unit that's having the most challenges. And there's one that's going through a bit of a dip and a refactoring of how they're doing things. And he asked me the same question. He says, this is really hard. And he said, how do you get through it? And I said, I thought about it and I said, well, whenever you're faced with an obstacle like that, the engineer in me, at least, always immediately goes to a plan. What is the plan? And if you can have a plan and say, well, these are the three things that if I can fix those, that's resolves the crux of the problem I'm trying to work through, then I can get to the other side. If you have a plan like that, then you have hope. And if you have hope, it takes you through the tough times.
So you you minimize the emotion going through the logical steps to get to that end result type of thing. Is that your
Well, I mean, where's the negative emotions come from? The negative emotions come from despair, from lack of confidence, from fear. So if you have a plan, then those go away and they're replaced by hope. It's not a mind game. It's actually get yourself a freaking strategy and then go for that North Star. And you're not worrying about the tough times. Well, they're there, but it's enough to get through because you know what you need to do. And it shouldn't be random. You should be able to look at what the problem is you're faced with and say, what is the single biggest obstacle between me and what I need to get this company to? And then what are the things I need to do to overcome this obstacle? Don't ignore your biggest obstacle. Go head on against it. If that is the thing that you really need to fix. I mean, if you've got an obstacle that says, I'm trying to make electric cars in my basement and competing with, Chinese factories. That's an obstacle that you're not going to get around. You're not going to get a plan. That's not a great startup idea. But if you've got a business that you just need to modify in some way, whether it's I've got the wrong person in this wrong seat or whatever else, and I need to change or rechange what that position is, or I need a little extra funding, or I need to stop doing this and start doing this and change where my resources are allocated, then you do it.
And is that why you mentioned corporate versus personal? Because corporate, could be a plan for.
Well, yes. I mean, the in corporate side of things, like when people say, David, why do you have this company? What is the purpose of this company? And sometimes I say, well, we've got all these products and we have all these customers and we have all these markets and technologies, and you think that is everything. But I mean, this company used to work in analog technology. Some of the products we make, the markets don't even exist anymore for what we did. We've shifted. I said, if you could sort of say there's a zeroth rule of this company, it's to be hard to kill. So how do you design a company to be hard to kill? And you sit there and go, well, I need to have a strategy that's going to get us through whatever the next change in our industry is. We're not just going to coast. We're going to make things happen. We need to have excellent people. We need to have a great relationship with our bank. We need to make sure that we have great financial planning and scenario analysis, that, we're not going to get into trouble if and there's no way out of it. We're going to have, say, reliance on multiple different types of product lines, recession proof or boom bust proof, and so forth, and take advantage of everything. So we could create a competitive moat or a fortress even. You create a network between your products so that, one product drags along other ones and you sell a bigger basket of goods. These are the sorts of things that create a fortress inside of a company. And so that's the thinking about making your company hard to kill, goes in 10 different directions, but it's a really important conversation to have.
And when I had my MBA as well. And when I went through that program, we did an analysis of Blockbuster, and they didn't think that way when
No.
Netflix came, right? So you acquiring also potential competitors or bringing them on board early on goes to that same philosophy as it'll be harder to kill you if you acquire the next innovation thing too. Is that how you think about acquiring as well?
Yeah. Actually, that's really important. A number of our competitors did some epic value destruction. What they did is they bought some of their biggest competitors, and they merged them. And the only savings you really have is some back office, maybe a few less accountants and managers and stuff like that. But then you've got overlap, so you paid for that though. So you have to get rid of a bunch of product lines, then decide which ones to keep. And then you've got a sales force that's too big, so you need to lean that out. How are you going to really pay for the 200 million you spent on this company? You're not going to save it, a few $100,000 here and there. To me, terrible strategy. What we like to do is we say, well, I don't want to buy our direct competitor. I want to buy the next big thing that can overwhelm that competitor, you could sort of say. So you look for those bright people with that cool new idea that need that extra traction, maybe being part of a larger entity, and they're willing to do that and excited, and you say, together we can be more. And you end up buying that little software company that with $1 million in sales that becomes a $100 million software company. That is a really good use of capital.
I see that. So instead of buying a synergy type of firm to just grow to grow, it's more of a technology high growth or
Exactly.
that complements.
Smart people.
Right.
Smart people can do anything. And so
And how do you deal with change management around that? Like, it's a new entity, a new culture. They go from 3 employees to now 500 employees or whatever.
a little bit at a time. One of the things we do is at least today, and maybe even before as well, the idea was often you tuck them underneath another part of your company, so that you could say a big brother that cares about them. If I don't have somebody in my company that is passionate about bringing this other company on board, we don't do it. Even if there's a great business plan otherwise, because it'll die on the vine. You have to have people passionately excited inside your company about buying that company, and that company needs to be passionately excited about why they're joining your company. And hopefully the founders are doing it. They don't want to leave because they see this great future. So that's how you create value.
And is that a correlation with employee stocks within the company?
Yep. That's a whole nother topic. Yeah, Ross Video is an ESOP company, employee stock ownership plan. And I remember once because we've been doing open book management for years, where we show the financials to all the employees. Most of the reasons we did it originally was to get rid of rumors, because people would say, "Oh, we're going to get sold, or we're going to go bankrupt, or there's going to be this big layoff." And it's like, we'd look at the managers of the company, would look like, "What are they talking about? We're having the best month ever." Well, did they know? There's somebody in some department is saying this, maybe just to get attention. And so we always felt that the rumors were worse than the truth. And so the best way to get rumors out of your company was to show the financials. So we did that. But then the next thing that happens is you have a great month, your great year, and you cheer it on, and people will go, "Good for you, David.
Mm,
You just made a lot more money and I got a job."
mm.
And I remember once I had an employee. We were at a trade show and he was holding a drink that was bigger than his head and it was alcoholic. And he's well through it and he says, "David, I totally get it." I said, "What are you talking about?" His name was David too,
Mm.
actually. And he said, "The reason you don't sell any shares to any of us is because you're greedy, but that's okay. It's just business."
Oh God.
And I went, "Oh my God, I never thought about the way that they would look at that." And I went, "No, it's not because I'm greedy. It's because I'm I'm honest. We're a private company. We're not for sale. We're not taking any external equity. And I can't tell you it's going to be decades before we ever do. I'm going to take your money and you're never going to see it again." And so shortly after that, I met a company called ESOP Builders, a Canadian company, and they teach you how to do a stock market inside your own company.
Mm.
And the idea is you come up with a way to value your company. In our case, it's 0.8 times revenue plus 3 times profit divided by the number of outstanding shares. So when we started the ESOP, shares were $3.77 each. And then once a year, after you get your financials done, you announce the new value of the company, and anybody that wants to buy shares, buy shares. Anybody who wants to sell them, sell, and you match them up with each other. So it's now an arm's length transaction, and it's tax efficient, completely legal. Anyway, and encouraged, in fact. And now I'm able to say, well, now I've got 700 shareholders in the company.
Mm.
Every one out of every 2 employees is a shareholder in Ross, all thinking like owners. And when we talk about we posted this great deal, or we're not making a lot of money this year because we're investing for next year, and this is where the stock is going and the company is going, they're cheering us on. They're part of it. And nobody is now, talking to me with a drink as big as their head saying, we're greedy. It's like, "Thank you, David, you're sharing." And I think it's another element of our success.
2 questions to that. Is
Okay.
David still there?
No, he's
Okay, I
no,
do
he's
not know.
not.
That's
He's not. He's young and he's early in
okay.
his career.
And then second, yeah, that must have played. Now you have all these entrepreneurs that are helping build the business to a bigger thing, and they're really geared. They must be really attached to the vision now of growth and prosperity and all that. And that must be very fulfilling for you too, to see 700 shareholders being a part of something too. Does it take pressure off to you as well from a operations perspective?
I think it just sets the tone of the company.
Mm,
It if for one thing, you want to talk about profitability. Profitability can sound really negative. It's capitalism. It's basically saying, you know, you're making this money for the man kind of thing, and the little guy gets squeezed, right?
mm,
But in an ESOP company, it's like, well, yeah, because we've seen the financials and we've seen the way we want to see the company grow. The only way our share price, the way we've done the formula for the share price to go up, is for us to grow.
mm.
And also, if we need to be more profitable for us to get raises, we understand the way that the money doesn't come from nowhere. So people are financially literate in our
Mm.
company, and we're all aiming in that same direction. It just changes the tone to we're all just trying to make this thing even better.
And going back to the Canadian US thing, um, from a regulation perspective, a tax perspective, does it hinder you to be in Canada? Like there's a notion growing in Canada versus growing in Florida or Nevada or whatnot from a tax efficiency perspective. Has that crossed your mind of
No, it's the other way around. So we hire engineers all over the world, especially because of our acquisitions. And the 2 places that are the easiest, or for an Ottawa-based company to hire, is Canada, the United States. If we want to hire an engineer in the United States, we know that we are making a decision to not hire 2 engineers in Canada. because with the R&D rebates and IRAP grants and SIF funding and all of the other programs that are out there, plus the difference in the dollar, 72-cent dollar this morning, I think, plus cost of living differences, different salary expectations, it's almost 2 to 1. So you want to build an engineering technology company, Ottawa and Canada are a fabulous place to do it. If you want to be a manufacturer in North America, Canada is, again, probably the best place to do it. We promised we wouldn't get into
Mm,
politics, but I will skim it a little bit.
mm,
Right now with tariffs, if I was an American company selling into the United States, I would be buying materials like integrated circuits and circuit boards often from China and Far East and things like that, and seeing a tremendous tariff placed on those, and you don't get that money back. It's not like the moment you resell it, they give you a refund. No, that money is gone. So your cost of inputs is higher. In Canada, we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership,
mm,
so we have the ability, and actually we have free trade, I think, with 52 countries. That was the last number I looked at. The United States right now is free trade with 2, Canada and the US, and there's tariffs all over the place everywhere else. So our input costs are less. And then CUSMA still exists. So we have free trade into the United States. So if we're selling into the United States, our costs are lower.
mm.
Uh, and we have a lower dollar, and then we also have no tariffs on most of what we're selling, and then our input costs are lower. So why would I want to design or build a product anywhere other than Canada?
So if you started today, what would be your decision making? You'd still build in Canada?
Yeah, of course. And here in Ottawa, for example, like we've got La Cité, we've got Algonquin College, we've got Ottawa U, we've got Carleton. We hire somewhere in the order of 50 co-op students every single term,
Mm.
and so the talent flow. You can tell. Remember my story
Yeah.
earlier where I said co-op students can do
Right.
anything.
50, you said too.
So yeah, now it's gone from 1 or 2 to like 50 students every single term, and then we find the very best, and those get full-time jobs. That is a fabulous talent pool. You don't have to build that in Silicon Valley. I
Mm.
think Canada, and in this case Ottawa, has a lot to offer, and it's a cheaper place to live than Toronto.
And I appreciate you saying that because you've been through the horizon on a lot of mountains, especially from on entrepreneurship. And the feedback I'm getting from all the younger entrepreneurs in my ecosystem is I have to move to the States. I have to get there. I have to build there. Where the sentiment that you're talking about is no, you don't. There's two sides to every coin. What side are you looking at?
I People are really important. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes they may feel like they have to go there because maybe they can't find that particular skill set. Maybe they're doing bioengineering or something like that, and it's not the strength of someplace in Canada. Then that makes sense. If they're trying to just do software development or other types of, I don't know why you'd have to be there. One of the reasons they may feel they need to be there is if they want to raise capital. American capital has a reputation, it's probably well earned, that they are willing to give you a higher valuation of your company than Canadian investors. Now, what the question is what's the terms associated with that? Because I've talked to more than a few entrepreneurs that say, David, you still own basically 100% of your company except for what you've given to the employees. Uh, I'm about to lose control of my company. Can you help me?
Mm,
I went, well, you made that decision a long time ago when you took that money with those terms.
mm,
You are being squeezed out of that company. So that's the next question is maybe would you have taken a lower valuation but owned your company 10 years later?
mm.
Yes, no.
And what do you recommend early entrepreneurs do?
My favorite thing is the best place to raise capital is from your customers. Sell a product with a good margin, rinse and lather and repeat. And that's what Ross Video did. We never had to raise any external capital. If you can do it with friends and family, or some light touch round, do that. Don't don't do the deal with the devil
Mm.
that early because you want money now, because you're choosing your partner.
And would the trajectory of Ross be completely different if you did a big fund at the beginning of?
Well, personality wise, it probably wouldn't have worked with my dad, but yeah, absolutely. We could be much bigger today than we were then, except I wouldn't work there, my dad wouldn't work there, and it probably wouldn't be a Canadian company at all.
Right,
So what do you want? What's
right,
your long-term plan?
right. And when you look at your long-term plan now, are you looking a year in advance, 5 years advance, 10 years advance? And like, how do you predict these external factors like tariffs? And I'm while you're talking, I'm always thinking of the SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, like especially the external factors that are happening, especially in the last 5 years with COVID and tariffs and who knows what wars now. Like, how do you what's your process with stuff that you don't have control of at the end of the day?
That's where you have to have resiliency, um, and understanding different things. Like, I mean, we built a company that's hardware and software. So selling software is basically tariff free. You can put it up in the cloud. Customer can download it. There's an electronic transfer. It never crosses a border from the point of view of a customs transaction. So that's it. By the way, that's another reason that there's no reason not to. You shouldn't worry about tariffs if you're a software company in Canada. It's almost irrelevant. Um, from the point of view of tariffs in the United States as well, one of the things you can do to minimize that is have an entity in the United States that imports. Instead of having a distributor that imports your product into the United States, you import it yourself and distribute it from there. That means you use something called a, um, there's a transfer markup on it, saying that anyway, it reduces your what's taxable, and then you can mark it up to the list price in the United States. So there's things you can do to organize your affairs that are tariff proof. Um, the other thing is just don't get yourself into a situation where if you do have a dip like that you can't pull back. Maybe if things are really bad, you do have to do a layoff. But don't that make sure your company's structured that if that ever has to happen, that you don't destroy your company in the process because it really isn't structured to do that. In other words, if you sometimes if you have to cut your sales force in half, for example, does your sales drop in half or does it go down by 25%? And other people can have higher quotas because you already have established relationships. There's ways to have resilience inside your company that way.
And before we go into the lightning round, is there anything I missed in regards to we should talk about from an entrepreneurial perspective and a Ross video perspective?
Oh, probably. This is the short phone call or the conversation. We could probably talk for hours.
I think I could keep on asking you a lot of questions, but I really want to be cautious of your time because I really appreciate it. Before I get into that, what is one moment in your career that was one of the hardest to stomach and overcome that comes to your mind?
Wow, there's probably a few. Um, there was, I think one of them was about 15 or 20 years ago. We had to do a layoff in the company, and it was a fairly deep one. And I know we had to maybe let 80 or 100 people go, and we had to tap people on the shoulder, bring them into the room, and tell them that they weren't working here anymore. And having to look at that many people in the eye uh, and understand what it did to their lives was like, I mean, I had to just walk to the window and stare out. I just couldn't talk to anybody. I was so upset. Um, and I, I'm sure if somebody was gonna, give me a hug or something like that and say, David, it wasn't all you, but I'm the CEO. And so everything that does happen ultimately is my responsibility. And you sit there and you think, what did I not do right? What could I have done to prevent this? And so it really, I hope I never stop feeling that way in a situation like that. Those are the toughest moments when possibly a bad or inexperienced decision that you make as an owner of a company hurts people that you actually like, that they didn't do anything wrong to have this happen to them. That's tough.
And how do you overcome that?
Try not to do as many things wrong. Try not to overextend yourself. And it's hard. We're always there's always this capital allocation question of, do we make a mistake at some point where we didn't go fast enough or we went too fast?
Right.
You only have so much of a crystal ball. Should we get into this business? We think so, but maybe we shouldn't. There's still.
Do you question a lot of decision making, or like at what point do you like, I need to make this decision and just go with it?
We do question every decision making. We do have long conversations about them, but the most important thing is you do have to ultimately make a decision. That's actually interesting. If you want to ask me one more thing about Ross Video, I understand that the way we do our leadership team meetings at my immediate team is unlike almost anybody does anywhere. So what's that mean? So we meet once a week on Wednesday afternoons. It started as a lunch because I couldn't get my dad to talk to us, and like, you got to eat. So while you're eating, we're going to have a management meeting that we're not having, and that expanded into something that eventually had minutes, and we bring food in, and now that meeting is from noon till 6 p.m. every week.
Wow.
And we have a standard agenda of, what's orders, sales, cash, tech support issues, you name it. That's the standard. Like, let's look at the metrics and KPIs of the company and understand it. But then, basically there's 6 of us. Everybody brings a few topics, and they just, it's up to them. And then we when we're done, we have like 20 topics every single week that somebody thinks is important on my management team, and we solve them together by looking at all the angles, and we take our time working through them. I'm not a CEO that says, give me the metric, make this number better, get out of here. I've had CEOs say, David, I'm done my management meetings in 15 minutes. What the heck do you talk about? I said, we talk about everything. I've had the board say, David, what happens if you're not there? There's nobody that knows everything about the company like you do. I went, what are you talking about? My entire management team knows everything I know because we talk about it all together. You have 6 CEOs, not one, in this team. And so that's actually, I think, a lot of resilience as well. It's a way to avoid making mistakes, because every single week we try and solve every single major issue that's come up. So the average time is like 2.5 working days from an issue to a resolution and a decision. And we've been doing this for decades. And I read a book recently, it's called The Boyd Loop. But the idea is basically you can be highly competitive if you can make decisions faster than anybody else. And so this is the Ross Video Boyd Loop, and it is 6 hours a week well spent. And the team, I think, all basically says that that's their favorite point of the week. That's when we gel, and we do what feels like a strategy session every week, where we're dealing with all these issues. And it could be for everything from a strategy issue to a tactical issue to an HR issue, a financial issue, or just an FYI, information. But we all are on the same page every week. So I thought that was worth sharing.
And to add to that, or follow-up question to that, is your 6 individuals on the leadership team, are they all from Ottawa?
No, not anymore.
So you could do it virtually.
Yeah, I have one person now in the team that's in the United States, and we have another one in sales that's in Barcelona, or no, in Spain.
Okay, so you do it virtually on like a Zoom call type of thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking like physically get in whiteboards. You have the setup where everyone can collaborate wherever.
We share the minutes in the Teams meeting actually. Instead of we used to do it on the whiteboard, everybody opens their laptop, so we remote people can see everybody's faces. We open up the microphone bridge, so it's like being in the room. One of the things for remote meetings is the remote participant should not be at a substantial disadvantage,
Right.
and so open your freaking laptop,
Yeah.
turn on your camera, and you're there in person as if you're remote.
And you guys have how many people are in Ottawa versus virtually out of the 1,500 employees?
I think we probably have about 900 or 1,000 in Canada. Most of them are in Ottawa or Iroquois. I think we've got about 250 in Iroquois in manufacturing.
And that virtual has happened over the last 5 years, or it's happened before the pandemic?
We were a multi-site company. Like we bought that first software company was in the Netherlands, for example.
Right.
Most of the company, we've only bought 4 companies in Canada, so 20 companies we bought have been outside of Canada. So when COVID hit and suddenly we had 0 days warning that we're suddenly a virtual corporation, we're planning to do a test trial, and then we went home and then didn't come back.
Right.
And so we went virtual, but we had a culture that was already used to working with
Okay.
virtual employees, so we just slid into it. Actually,
Nice.
and even now, we allow people to have their hybrid work lanes, and we're not forcing people back to work. We force people to get together for meetings because they need to meet people in person, but we don't make people come into the office, into a cube, put on a headphone, and do a Teams meeting to some person that's not there.
Right.
To me, that's batty.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So some lightning
Okay,
questions.
do it.
Founder mode or operator mode?
Define those.
Founder in the sense of work on the business or in the business?
Oh, on. Of course.
Build versus buy?
Both. They're both good. If it's something completely new, buy, because you'll never do the expertise. If it's an add-on, man, that's super efficient. Build.
Best business decision you've made?
Too many. I'll say the first one, the acquisition of that software company.
Most expensive lesson you've learned?
Don't try and do a manufacturing competition with the Chinese.
One metric you always look at first?
Revenue.
Biggest time wasters for CEOs?
Email.
A meeting you would never cancel? When's it?
I want to say my ELT meeting, but we have to cancel it sometimes if we don't have quorum.
Hiring. So for hiring, potential or proven performance?
Depends. Both. You want to have the potential because the new people coming in from university or whatever are fabulous, but sometimes you need the master builder who has been there, done it before, and they can do amazing things.
What do you optimize for? Speed, quality, or learning?
Yes.
Speed?
No, I said yes. Yeah, I know you want me to choose. I guess you have to go with quality first. If you don't have quality, you're dead.
What is harder, starting a company or sustaining growth?
Starting a company. That's a monumental superhuman job.
What do you know when do you know it's time to say no to a new opportunity?
When you realize you'll be overwhelmed with it because you have too many other things going on, too many other resource constraints.
One thing you wish more engineers understood about business? I don't want to get you in trouble.
I would say marketing.
Makes sense. A great CEO is someone who
Listens.
the hardest part of leadership is
I say people.
my unfair advantage is
My team.
I know we would win when
No, we would win.
I knew we would win when. Sorry.
Oh, I knew we would win when I could see the pattern of our growth in the financials and we had a real track record.
The moment I almost quit was
Oh, when my dad and I really had a hard time in some of the succession planning.
all right. Yeah. The best customer feedback I ever received was
I think I told you that story when they bought from somebody else because I didn't know why we were good.
the best hire I ever made taught me
Power of people.
if I had to start over, I would.
Make even better decisions with hindsight.
We have a closing question. If you put a sticky note on your first laptop before you ever got started, what would it say?
It's going to be okay.
Actually, that's been a few sticky notes, which is interesting. Well, Dave, I really, really appreciate you coming, taking the time. I think there's so much content in here, and I really back to the beginning of this podcast and me thanking you for spending that 20 minutes with me 10 years ago and now being able to spend almost 2 hours with me. And I mean, I could talk to you all day because as a young entrepreneur or now more established entrepreneur, there's so many directions a business can go into. And once you go through the experiences that you've gone through, you start seeing the results of it. And I do want to hope this podcast and all this content shares with a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs that you can do it in Canada. I mean, you even doing the numbers around it's 2-1 versus the States to Canada. And, seeing not only a company of 1 to 100 employees, but 1,500 employees across Canada, you doing the math on that is just shows that it is possible. And there's a huge amount of opportunity here. You just gotta, what side of the coin are you actually looking at? And throughout this whole conversation, I've seen the side that you look at, and it's optimism, confidence, strategic thinking. It's all these things that have got you to where you are now. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. So thank you. Where can people find you, or any last words before we close off?
I'm around. I sometimes get out to Ottawa events. I go to a lot of industry trade shows. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
At David Ross.
Yeah, just look for David Ross Video. I'll pop up.
Perfect. Thanks, David. Share this with a friend so that they could be a part of this journey too. Keep watching for more.